So we are mostly back. We're going to do, well, it was never an hour-long talk, but we got a half-hour talk here for you, I guess. It's going to be a half hour whether it was or not. And, yeah, you met me earlier, Deviant, but we have Sean, or DarkSim905, if you found him on Twitter. He has been cataloging a lot of what's happened with this TSA key kind of situation.
I've been trying to.
Yeah. Many of you may have been following this unfold on Twitter. Some of you haven't. But if you're not familiar with what's been going on with the TSA luggage locks and the research the community has been doing, well, this is your chance to learn about that and see where we're going soon. So we'll just kind of play it back and forth as we go here. How many people are aware that there are these locks, especially in America, where the government can open them up, right? And many of them have this little red diamond on them. But what a lot of people don't know is that, A, these locks are not manufactured by one company. The way it works, there's Search Alert and there's Safe Skies, right? But Safe Skies is not as common. The little red diamond is Search Alert. Now, the Search Alert, or Travel Sentry, as they are known as, Travel Sentry locks, are licensed by a group, that like the Travel Sentry group, which is really just one guy, kind of, you'll learn, for production by any company who's willing to follow the standards of the lock manufacturing set out in this licensure. So you'll have all different brands that you can find on Amazon, all, quote, selling a TSA Traveler lock, and they all have that Travel Sentry logo. But people hadn't really inspected or known the history about this until, well, one of the earliest pieces written about it was by Mark Tobias. Mark Tobias wrote an article describing the history on a number of these designs, because these designs of lock, this is what's fascinating to me. The man behind this system, a man named John Vermeil, and he worked in airport luggage operations for years and years and years, for like decades. I mean, he was like overseeing, I think at Boston Logan, the security of luggage, and then he moved up within the airline industry to oversee luggage operations. And he knew, and he had friendships with a lot of bag throwers and a lot of bag handlers. Before the TSA even was the TSA, people sometimes needed to get into locked luggage, often like lost luggage. They would try to figure out whose it was. So there was this kind of collection of keys that were popular with people in luggage ops, because they were known to be popular keys for various brands. Like the Samsonite key is just one of these keys. Certain companies, many of which of course were overseas, had their luggage key. So informally and within the industry, a lot of bag people had this like mystery key ring that's so useful. Oh, you got to get yourself one of those Samsonite keys. Get yourself a Presto Lock key. So when John Vermeil was designing the idea of let's make a standard set of keys for the government, he didn't want to just invent it out of whole cloth. He said, well, we should start with this super utility. If I'm going to start charging the government for a ring of keys, I want it to be as useful as possible. I want it to also open, like if somebody has a locked Tourister or a locked American, whatever key, let's just give them the key. So that's why, if you've said to yourself ever, boy, some of these look pretty friggin' dumb. Like, what the hell is this? Why would someone create that in, 2003? Well, it's not because from 2003. I mean, there's a history to these locks before the TSA started using them as their master keys. And do you want to talk a little bit about when people really started getting into, hey, oh my God, have you seen these keys?
Yeah, I would say that my interest in this and a lot of other people's interest in this came up with this article by the Herald where they said, hey, this is what happens to your baggage at the airport. There's someone that goes through your luggage and they, instead of cutting off locks, they use these predefined keys, and it kind of just slowly ballooned from there. And then after this article came out, when people started getting more interest in it, that's when this popular Twitter photo surfaced, and there was a lot of back and forth about who originally took that photo, and we eventually tracked down that individual, and that's kind of where my interest really took a hit, because shortly after this photo was posted, there were a few people that started getting interest in, hey, where can I source those locks? Where can I get those keys? How does this work? And started researching the genesis of these locks and the security of them.
Yeah, we should point out in private circles and just on their own, a lot of people who are a lot of locksmiths like Holly will tell you that she had taken apart TSA locks just by herself. And if you're a competent locksmith, you can measure some cuts and try to make your own keys. But this period is really when it became the discussion was very out there.
Yeah.
And more people started seeing it.
This photo is kind of like everybody goes back to this and says, hey, this is kind of where this took off from.
Yeah. And then once someone like a friend of ours, Iron Geek, Adrian Crenshaw, he records a lot of video at conferences. You may have seen Iron Geek recordings even if you didn't realize. If you've seen a recorded con talk, there's a strong possibility it's an Iron Geek talk that he recorded. Like, he has this amazing recording rig. But he's also a lock picker. He's also a researcher. He works for Trusted Sec now. And that lit a fire under him, especially. He said, boy, this is not just something that's fun to talk about. I want to do it. So he jumped on Reddit. He's got a lot of exposure. And he started trying to source as much information as he could, as many measurements as he could. And then, first privately and then very publicly, this document started coming around, right?
Yeah, so essentially what happened was Iron Geek did a couple posts on Reddit, and he was saying, oh, I'm doing research on these TSA keys and these locks. Where can I find the locks and the keys? And his interest is more in the physical keys. But essentially what happened was I was like, hey, I came across this website. You should take a look at it. And he was like, okay, I'm going to sign up as a vendor, authorized distributor, what have you. And he actually came across this document. And it was something that was not password protected. It was just sitting on their server, open for the world to see.
Yeah, a lot of us are now Travel Sentry partners, affiliated partners. So you could make the case that that's a little fraudulent, but those of us who are will tell you this, as Sean just said, anybody could have downloaded this file. There was no CFAA violation or anything in getting this PDF.
The amazing thing about this is how long it was sitting on that server. We're talking 4 or 5 years that it just sat here, and nobody noticed that it was open to the public, open to the world. And these are high-res images. I mean, you can look at the album that I have on Imgur and some other websites. The photos are, 1,000 pixel by 1,000 pixel images.
Yeah,
that you can
they're really nice photos.
They're really, really cool. So as a result of that,
yes.
Was their intent to keep it a secret? I mean,
no. So
their intent was to not make it broadly public. They weren't like putting it on a billboard.
Essentially, the point of kind of this.
The purpose of the TSA key is just more convenient and security.
Right. I mean, this level of detail and because this document, this is just one page of a document. There's a lot of interesting shit in this document that I can tell you about level 6 especially. But that was just supposed to be circulated to the internal partners.
This is like internal staff, like TSA, like you should check this out if you're a baggage handler sort of thing. If you're dealing with our locks, this is an internal memo sort of thing. But apparently they didn't give a shit about it, so.
Yeah. So even though they said on every top and bottom of every page, this is sensitive material, like, I'm glad that's not a law because nobody cared, especially when it was literally in files / whatever, like on the web.
When you say
yes.
Samsonite locks, I think of a one pin lock.
Oh yeah.
And although there may be variations in those pins, a pig can hit those things so fast every time.
Yeah, so Raimundo points out much of this is academic because the actual TSA locks, as their origins were so old and crummy, most of the locks on these luggage systems are way easier to pick than anything else. I mean, we've tried to use them as contest locks as a goof in some of our games at DEF CON, and they're just used. Sometimes you stick a Turner tool in and they just fall open. So they're not. This is all just the fun of the challenge of trying to do it by decoding the keys. And Iron Geek was as far as I know, one of the first people to publicly show working prototypes that he made.
Iron Geek's main focus is on the physical keys and reproducing an actual keyring of blanks that work on all the different locks. He essentially posted first on Twitter and YouTube, and he was like, okay, I have this key, so I'm not bullshitting you. Here's the video, here's the proof. And then he decided to take it a step further and troll Master Lock. And he's like, oh, well, I can't find the right blank for this key. Can you guys help me out? Or are there reproduction keys or whatever? And they're like, oh, no, it's integrity of the system. We don't have duplicate keys available for that sort of thing.
Right.
So
And-
what we decided to
Yeah, and
do,
finding blanks has been a problem. Finding machinable blanks, other than us carving them on an easy entry, which is not cheap. So yeah, what we decided to do. Go ahead.
So what we decided to do was take it a step further. I had a lot of these ideas in my head because of my previous job and employment, and I had a 3D printer to work with, and I have some experience with SolidWorks. But essentially, what someone did was they took measurements of the key that somebody else provided to them, a third-party anonymous source, and they said, "Hey, we're going to design these keys in a 3D design program. We're going to send them to a 3D printer, and we're going to see if they worked." And someone decided to post them on GitHub, and this was the end result. This was a video that someone took. It became very popular
Within like a day.
a matter of minutes.
Yeah, like he was printing it out. Was this the fella in Montreal or Toronto? I think.
Yeah, he printed
Yeah.
this key, and he got it working within an hour, not even.
Yeah. So
And
I
what type
printed
of
some.
plastic was
What's that?
used in
This is ABS. I think he used ABS. I used ABS when I tried it at my local library, and like 3D printing, it's not reliable at first, and some people were saying it didn't work, but there was enough evidence that things were like, wow, it's just, it's going to grab the media, right? Like, oh look, plastic opens these government locks. So this is when tons of news articles started coming out.
It basically exploded from there.
Yeah.
And I had a few press individuals reach out to me and ask questions. Hey, what's the timeline? How did this work? And that's when I started my personal page as a timeline, because it was a mess trying to categorize a bunch of different tweets and Reddit posts and so on and so forth. It's nothing new. I mean, we've seen this at Hope previously with the handcuff keys that Ray printed and all that fun stuff. And it's just a gradual generation of that idea. The media kind of took it and exploded with it, and some people kind of embellish in it and the wrong ideas and say, oh, all the security is broken, but it's been that way for years.
Yeah, I don't know why 3D printing, I guess because it's just new. Anytime somebody does something controversial or odd, like, the 3D printed guns, remember when Defense Distributed did that? Like, everyone lost their mind, even though it's perfectly legal to manufacture your own guns, and people have been doing it forever with metal. The moment you do it unreliably and in lower resolution with plastic for way more money than it should cost, the media, blows up. And that's what happened with the keys. And a lot of people thought, okay, well, that must be the end of the story. I heard about that, and then the news cycle moved on. But that's not the end of the story. I mean, this is just still barely in the prototyping stage. More and more people start experimenting from that point, and that's where we are now. People are building these collections of travel locks because you can buy them all over the place. What's hard to get are some of the old generations of travel lock. No one, as far as I know, has ever seen a TSAOOT. Just never seen it. I'm sure they existed at some time. None of us, including Iron Geek, who has, I think this is Iron Geek's pile in this picture.
Can you flash back to the picture?
The number 3? Yeah, I can do that. So, number 3 is the super long, skinny blade. It's just, we can pull a much better picture up later if you want to see it. But yeah, just finding enough locks to keep experimenting with, that's where we are now. And there's a lot of things that still need to be fine-tuned. Just because, and this is Johnny Christmas, I think, with Johnny Christmas from Chicago did really nice, high-quality prints, and we started realizing that it's not just that the locks are so sloppy, sometimes the keys work and they don't. A lot of these designs need more effort and need more refining. A lot of these images these are not a finished product. There's still a lot, we're still discovering other odd found items. I'm pretty sure that this bathroom lock, which I bought a bunch of keys for, and they're still in my boxes at home because I just moved, so all my stuff just got across the country. But I think maybe this bathroom lock might work for TSAOOT. I think most people need to keep experimenting, and the most experimentation that's happening right now, and where it's needed the most, is with TSAOOT. If you buy TSA locks in a store or on Amazon, there's a 90% chance you're going to get 07 right now. TSAOOT is what everyone has moved to, but even though there's so many of them out there, a lot of people reporting, oh yeah, my printed key works, no, my printed key doesn't. Many people are saying my printed key won't even insert. So what I did is I took as many 007s as I could grab from my local shops and a few online, and I just took Bobbick's calipers and measured all the keyways from every different dimension that I could. because you'll see there's even though this is supposed to be a standard body behind the manufacturing, like there's tons of play in the keyway sizes. So you can't have bitting that's too tall, or you can't have a blade that's too wide. The key, by the way, even though you see in the photos it's a double-sided key, that is a convenience key. There's only bitting on one side of the TSAOOT. Some of them are wafer-based, some of them are pin-based, but it's one-sided only. We presume that there must be, not only is it a convenience key, but it's also the amount of times they might need to use that key. It doubles your wear-out surface, right? So if your key's not working, flip it around, use the other side. So if you want to get into this in a real easy way, get yourself some TSAOOTs, which are not hard to find. Print the TSAOOT, or get Iron Geek to send you one, because he just likes sending them to people. Try fine-tuning the TSAOOT, and if you're going to carry one key, this is the one to carry to play with at various lock events. If you're a very advanced person, you want to start looking at TSAOOT. This is the only key in the system and the only lock design in the system that is worth its salt at all. This is the only one that we've never seen reliably and repeatedly picked. This is not a common lock. This is made by Abbas. They are one of the only two, I think, like two brands of luggage. They're all high-end European luggage where you see the 006 key. But if you read more of those internal documents from Travel Sentry, you'll learn things like, if you want to manufacture TSA-compliant locks, they'll just they give that shit out like silver status on an airways. They'll just let you do that, unless you want to manufacture an 006. If you physically want to do, you have to send them samples of work designs. You have to say, yes, this is my, you literally have to submit and be approved as a lock manufacturer to make 006. And if you are approved, Travel Sentry will issue you which chambers you are to populate in your lock, which you do not use all the drilled chambers. You don't use all 7 chambers. They will issue you which warding on the front tip is your ward. All the front tip slots, those are passive warding. But not every 006 has the same, because they don't even want internal manufacturers to have the master key. They don't send it to them, as far as I know. They don't want you to possess it, even if you're at Abbas. You need a key for testing your luggage. You don't get this key. You shouldn't use this key. The Travel Sentry wants this key to be the most restricted. It's double-sided. I'm sure that that's just, again, for convenience. There might be some we've never actually pulled one up. No one wants to take their 006s apart because they're rare and they're really expensive. Bobbers has more Rimowa luggage than anyone I know, but even I can't be like, hey Bob, can I just rip one of those locks out of your luggage, please? So yeah, working on the 006 will be really awesome to see, and if people tackle that one, that to me is there's still a crown out there to be grabbed in all this, and that's it, in my opinion. What was the response? Of course, predictable, right?
So,
they didn't care.
Essentially, the TSA really doesn't care at the end of the day, because to them, it's not an operational security threat. It's the passengers. What do they care? They want to make sure you're not putting handguns or other stuff on an airplane. They want to get in your luggage and get out. Otherwise, it's not a threat to how they do stuff day in and day out. So surprisingly, since all of this has blown up, I haven't really had any spooky people outside my door or anybody asking me questions. Even a friend of mine that works at DHS, he didn't even remark about any of the stuff, and I was like, do you care? And he's like, I don't even know who you are. And I'm like, all right. So
yeah.
It's very surprising.
And the people understand, though, people in our community understand that this was a completely broken security model from the beginning. And we've, more than anything, people who are into this really love it as an example that you can try to make others in your, this is like the Thanksgiving dinner kind of talk, right? Around the table with your family who doesn't get security. If you can equate this, and we encourage people to equate this to government key escrow, there's a ton of pressure from the feds about how they want backdoors into your crypto. And James Comey says, yes, we need to have, we need to be able to get in, it's for your safety. We're from the government. We're here to make you safe.
Trust us.
Right. So, you get how well that works out. You're asking people to use something that is compromised, something that isn't worth it, really. And maybe that's fine for, your luggage that has some clothes in it. But for something like the security of your own privacy and your own data, this model doesn't scale to encryption. And even as far as luggage goes, like, my version of that is, no, you don't get a backdoor in my shitty crypto. Like, go ahead and sell the Safe Skies locks if you want. I'm going to keep using Abloy Protec every time I fly. And that's what I want. And if you need to get in it, well, you will do it right in front of me. So I know you got in it. And I know what you did when you were in it. And I know it got locked up again correctly. If you're happy with your, like, Safe Skies lock, fine. If you want to play with your Safe Skies and Travel Sentry lock, fine. Personally, I mean, the people in this room get it. Good security, there's no substitute for good security. And the best way to encourage people to use good security is to start taking apart and showing people the bad security. So I am thrilled. I wish we had more. All of my lock collection is, again, in my boxes. Sean thankfully brought some of the locks. He brought some of the 3D printed stuff. If you want to come up and see it, please do. If you want to just ask us more questions, we got back on track on time really fast. This was awesome. But yeah, thank you so much for letting us blab about this for a minute. Awesome. Thank you. And there are questions. Go ahead, Dave and Dustin.
So, just since it's an interesting time to revisit, Packing in the Friendly Skies, does anybody not, show of hands, has anybody not seen Packing in the Friendly Skies? Deviant's presentation on traveling with firearms. So maybe you want to give a primer on that.
Really quick, so yeah, Dave is saying, the Packing in the Friendly Skies talk. That was when I told people that I always fly with heavy-duty padlocks on my hard Pelican cases. And everyone said, I don't think you're allowed to do that, are you? And I said, you are if there's a firearm. So I fly with a firearm in all of my luggage all the time, everywhere. And because of that, I've been cataloging and journaling how it works at every airport for years now, and people email me. So I'll even, let me throw a web browser up. We'll see how many stories we're up to on the web.
Yeah, you have that log somewhere on the web?
Yeah, so on the internets.
So well when you fly the movies.
Yeah, it's a little harder there.
Ask me how I know that. ORD.
But yeah, there's just tons and tons of passenger accounts, like how you were treated at an airport, what the airline, like little rating systems, which airlines are better than others. So yes, that's Packing in the Friendly Skies, and that's why I don't use TSA locks.
So my follow-up to that question is, with all that you've documented, have you seen instances in the U.S. of destruction of luggage? I know just in passing a few years ago, we were traveling down there, and I said, well, you're using a 321 on there. Can't they just chop it off the bolt cutter? And you said, or I don't even know, I was pointing out your hinges on one of the old ammo boxes. You said, well, they're not going to pull the hinges, they'll only cut locks. What's the latest status on that in the U.S. and then maybe international?
So Jay was asking about what about, can they chop your locks off? Yeah, they totally can. That they've cut my Protex once before.
But not that. But you said at the time at least they're not going to mess with hinges and they're not going to damage luggage.
Right. I don't think they would ever try to physically cut apart, because literally what they did when that happened, by the way, they put TSA locks on the luggage, and they put my Protex in the luggage, and they sent it from. That was coming back from. Oh, I got my money back. It took me a year and a month. Yep. Because I said, and that's because as you see on those log files, I literally was like, I checked in at Honolulu Airport. I spoke to Eric. I had my luggage screened by Dean. Then I flew through San Francisco. I know it didn't happen in San Francisco because you have a TSA paper in here, and San Francisco uses the CAS. They don't use TSA. And I laid it down, and I was like, these are all the people I talked to. They said I was cleared to fly. STSO member Smith said yes, and they're like, fuck. So yeah, and they sent me a check for whatever, $60 or something, $70. Yeah, so I don't think they would ever cut luggage because they have no way of putting it back together, and they are literally they are in theory liable if they destroy something of yours. So I don't think anyone would be physically breaking what they would do, honestly, if they had a luggage that there was no shackle, and I think they just wouldn't put it on the plane. I think they would try to reach the passenger and eventually say, hey, yeah, this is Frank in Minneapolis. How do you want this bag? We can't load it. We couldn't get into it. Now, there was that other thing flying internationally with the ammo case. That's a whole other story. I'll tell you about that. Then they just put it on the plane. Yeah. We had Dossman and Jack in a sec. Yeah.
I'm trying to be brief, but I'm sure we've all had interesting interactions with TSA in the last day. I flying from Indianapolis, is where I started my journey, and you know, you give the baggage, you know, hey, there's a bunch of dense locks in my bag, you know, so they don't freak out when they see the screen. And one of the TSA guys started chatting me up a little bit, and while they were going through my luggage, and you know, about 10 minutes or so while they're going through everything, and he's just going to chat with me. It's like, yeah, so the photos, the master keys that I got, and he's just started.
Oh, he brought that up.
He brought it up. He brought it up.
Oh, wow.
And so he's like, yeah, one of our bosses accidentally left it exposed for a short little while, and then someone else, you know, made some 3D printable versions of it and stuff, and you know, I was like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. The dude was cool, and by the end of the conversation, I mean, he was talking about, you know, he does some lock picking and shimming, and it comes in handy for luggage and stuff. And, if I had a card with me at that moment, I would have, if I'd been thinking, I would have given the card to another reason. But it was interesting to hear his side, and the TSA folks are aware of this going on, the people he interacts with.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So, my funniest one is going through Moscow airport.
Oh yeah.
Coming back from PH days, we'd bought a bunch of handcuffs. So my suitcase has got 35 sets of handcuffs in it.
Ooh, baby.
And Moscow airport, you have to go through a scanner before you even go in the airport. They're looking for firearms that somebody's going to do something with. So I go in and I put it through, and automatically they go and grab my bag and stuff. Can you open the bag? I mean, she didn't speak English and I didn't speak Russian. So it's like, so I unlocked it, opened it, and it's like trade samples.
Yeah.
And they're all new. They're all still in oiled paper wrappers. It's like, but the whole suitcase is just full of handcuffs.
Has anyone ever had trouble with the TSA with lockpicks ever or anything like that?
The worst I've ever had was actually, there was a time at JFK where the person, you know, was like, what are these? I'm like, well, they're tools for, you know, repairing and manipulating, and basically figuring out what's wrong with locks. Like, the lockpicks? Yeah, they are. That's part of what I do and everything else. It's like, well, you can't have these. So, yes, I can. They are non-sharp tools, they're only 7 inches in length. They're really fine. Like, well, yes, but those are guidelines. It's up to us to interpret those guidelines. And I said, no, if that's not the case, you know, I've flown many times as part of my, you know, what I need to do. I need these for the job that I'm going to be on after this. He says, well, I'm sorry, but if you can't surrender them, you can't fly. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable to me. I need to speak to your manager. And so I talked to him, and you know, they go off and have a little powwow. He comes back and says, sorry, sir, you can't have these. And I said, and I'm like, why can I not have these? I mean, and I'm like, and I even looked up in that time while they were having a powwow. I looked up TSA guidelines. I'm like, look, it says right here, non-sharp tools are essentially length. This is perfectly fine. He says, well, you see, they have a little pointed tip on there. They're kind of sharp. I'm like, and I start jabbing. I'm like, it's not sharp at all. He's like, well, sorry, sir, you still can't have that. I'm like, no. And so this is also why I show up to the airport quite early when I This was around 5 years ago, I want to say, at JFK. And so I just said, no, I mean, I'm not moving this. According to guidelines, this is perfectly legal. I don't know why you people are saying this. I'm like, get me as high as you can go.
Do you know who the highest ranked person is at any airport with TSA? You want to ask for the CSM. That is the TSA person who doesn't wear a fake blue police shirt, but they wear a suit and tie or a dress suit, whatever. They are the customer service manager. And if you fly out of one airport a lot, like I can tell you, Robert Ellis is the CSM at Philadelphia Airport.
Eventually I got to what they told me was the person who leads TSA in what they do at JFK for the entire airport. And he said, well, no, the guy's right, and according to the guidelines, it's perfectly fine. He's like, is this just like some kid or something? Like, well, he showed you a business card. He's like, well, I don't see a problem with that. And they go off and have a powwow again. And then because they're trying to figure out how to prevent me. I don't know why they're so invested in this, but they're trying to prevent me from going through it.
Self-righteous.
Well, and so,
Yeah.
Scary.
And so they eventually called the person at JFK Airport who's in charge of all of the vendors and shops, because maybe some of the people in some of the stores would feel uncomfortable with me going through the store with pixels. And they said the same thing, well, like, is it against the guidelines? And at this point, they got the word, like, no. And it's like, okay, well, what if he's like, yeah, he showed me a business card, he has security. And they're like, we're fine with it. And then so they eventually got me through. I mean, it took like a good 30 solid minutes of arguing, but I mean, as long as you're calm, cool, collected, know what you're doing, know what the facts are, and the facts are on your side, there's nothing to worry.
Speaking to your issue, it's my understanding that the TSA actually released an internal memorandum reminding their agents explicitly that lockpicks are okay.
They did that with handcuffs too, because I think there was a big hubbub about handcuffs, about like some celebrity going through or something like that.
Handcuffs are on the
This
site
was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember on where
But there was a news article about a young kid who was arrested at a checkpoint for a warrant or something. And the article stated he had in his possession X, Y, and included, I think it was lockpicks. And the article clarified from the statement of the director of that airport, said, we want to clarify nothing he had on him was illegal. This was only an outstanding warrant, the blah. So in an inadvertent way, it's been clarified as lockpicks are legal.
I had to get rid of some knitting needles going through.
They're stabby?
Well, and they were metal, and they were
Yeah.
about that long, and I even had a printout. This was all first starting, when all the security was starting. And I had a printout that said knitting needles aren't allowed object of every world. And they wouldn't. I had to pull my knitting off of it.
If you stuck to your guns, you probably could have done it. But
Maybe.
That's where TSA gets you.
Right.
Usually when you get into the airport, you're in a hurry. It's like, oh, I need to get my flight.
Well, I go with metal ones now, and I haven't been hassled for years, but I think it was when they first done it. Of course, it was the same as the screener that hit me in the crotch, too, so it wasn't as
So I used to work at TSA on the IT side, and used to have access to the bulletin board system that these screeners use. What you have to remember is their mentality and the overriding question that used to appear on the bulletin board system regularly, like every week, is when are we going to be allowed to carry guns? So this is the mentality of the people you're dealing with. They want to be cops. They want to be law enforcement. They think of themselves as law enforcement, not as screeners.
Jack is waiting for a while.
Yeah, here's the deal with TSA. And here's the deal with TSA at the ground level, not the entire overarching organization, because I have worked with many professionals at higher levels of TSA who were constant professionals, and I worked with many days a week because counted on every day social information. Prior to September 11th, prior to that, all the employees were security. They were literally, I worked at O'Hare, there's Argon Bright Security, our name for them, aren't too bright security. Okay? These were not people who were vetted. These were not people who were screened. These were not people who had any kind of lifelong commitment to your well-being. And then overnight, federal government had to hire a fucking army of people to try to stem what they, and at the time, at least directly after the time, legitimately perceived as an almost existential threat that people will be coming to our airports on a constant basis, armed with nothing but bomb strap. And there were people who actually thought that. And you know what? At the time, it wasn't actually a rational thing. It turns out they threw their best ball, their game was over for the most part, and then we move on. But at the time, these people, we really thought that these people were trying to fucking So they overnight, they turned your mall security guards into federal fucking employees. They just waved a magic wand and said, you are now all the Department of Homeland Security. Forget about the fact that last week you were making $12 an hour living in your mom's basement doing security.
There are still billboards in Compton that say, join the TSA.
Yeah.
This is still in it.
I'm not making this up.
The TSA is a kleptocracy.
So you join TSA and then you might end up somewhere better. So the thing to remember about TSA is that, yeah, are they mall security guards? They are. But at the end of the day, not all of them are fucking jaywalkers. And if we could just back off a little, we shouldn't give up our rights. But to think, like, some people, when they go through that line, you know, at some point complaining about the TSA, like complaining about the weather, just deal with every individual as a fucking individual. And things will probably be okay.
Yeah, being polite and just not getting them angrier. You guys know social engineering. You pace and lead, and you can steer that conversation. They don't want to be doing it to you any more than you're going through it.
I mean, I have flown armed. Like, I have flown with a gun on my hip on the plane, and I have flown with a gun in my luggage. And if I'm flying out of O'Hare, and it's not on business, so I don't have a gun on my hip, I'm not putting it in the luggage, I'm leaving it home, because it's a fucking nightmare out there. It's just a pain in the ass. I get here, my gun's still in the fucking air. Literally in the air. And I'm like, well, next time I'm just going to leave it.
I've flown about O'Hare a lot with my guns. My story's online. All right, we got time for just maybe one or two more comments, and then we do want to get to Tom.
You guys, I used to do research in frequencies, and radio shit. X-rays, common frequencies. If you guys want the TSA to be blind to shit, put a prize, get a cover of PCB, blank, put it over your shit, and the TSA wins. Doesn't matter, bomb, gun, anything. Don't use it to do any of that. Just but if you want to get your lock through without security, really, you know,
won't that
pushing
be
you, PCBs.
Will that be blurred out then?
Yeah, won't it just be a big black sphere?
So what it does is so it won't work against. There's two types of scanners that are popular within the X-ray machines. So they have like the millimeter wave.
You're talking about the body scanners, the AIT.
So they actually have those in the luggage scanners
okay.
as well. The PCB trick does not work against it. It's the more common ones where it's actually like the X-rays that go. PCB will make it so everything underneath it is gray, and that's why they have you take your laptop out. Because they're just like you can put shit underneath it. Like I put my passport underneath my laptop all the time.
Because your battery is layers of metal.
But PCB will make every image underneath it for X-ray gray.
But not black. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, it makes it fuzzy.
Okay.
Is what it actually looks like. And
fascinating.
TSA, at least they define their standards. Canadian, what's called TSA, they say tools are not allowed and micro tools are allowed. And I've gone to the leaders of TSA, actually Border Canada, who actually make up those rules, and they will not define what a micro tool is. Because they say, no, it must be up to interpretation. You know, I understand you want it to work, but, you know, maybe we can give you a written notice for this one time, but it's not anything else. And they actually have, I used to fly with a little thing that had little pliers on it and a bunch of little screwdrivers, had no blades, that's why I flew with it all the time. But CATSA took it away because they said, oh no, micro tools are allowed. I'm like, but it's like this big. It says, no, but it has a full-size Phillips bit. And so that's why you can't have it. Yeah, and that's what that guy clarified as a tool versus a micro tool. And of course, he threw it right into his pocket, not into the trash. With CATSA, you have no, at least you don't even have when you stand on the TSA where non-sharp tools are essentially blank. CATSA, you have